moving on to the actual second topic, I'd like to take a moment to introduce two subject matter experts that are related to the actual corporate housing side that is being impacted. You know, during the challenges that we face today and throughout these last 30 years, I don't think corporate housing has been impacted nearly as much as it has been today. So to really talk about these areas, I'd like to take time to introduce MaryEllen Daly and Alex Calder. So for those of you who do not know MaryEllen, she is an award-winning business leader who comes to us with over 20 years of industry knowledge in national and global corporate housing, having worked with industry leaders throughout her career. She recently brought her expertise to rental relocation and Interlink, and we are so happy she's part of this team. I also have with us Alex Calder, and if you've attended any one of our other educational sessions, you will probably recognize Alex as a familiar face. He has a vast and diverse professional background, but the most recent 5 years, he's been sharing his skill as part of the Interlink and rental teams as well. So, hi, Alex, and hi, MaryEllen. Thanks for joining in here.
Thanks, Bev.
Hey, before we do get underway, I have a question for all of our corporate attendees. Let's call this our first trivia question, okay? Are you ready? What does corporate housing mean to you? Or let me rephrase that. What is your definition of corporate housing? If you would take a moment and in your chat area, Kathleen, do you mind helping me monitor those?
Absolutely. Happy to.
Yeah, let's take just maybe 60, 90 seconds and people start chiming in. I'm starting to see some answers. So as we are all sending in a definition and you're all coming up with some wow, we've got them coming, and I guess I don't really have to resort to something like the Jeopardy theme song. While we're finishing up with the responses here, MaryEllen, I'd like to ask you, you've been in the corporate housing industry for over 20 years. How would you actually respond to this question?
Thanks, Bev, and what a great way to kick off our segment. Corporate housing has definitely evolved over the years. Back when I started in the industry over 20 years ago, corporate housing primarily consisted of the standard traditional furnished apartment. Now, due to next generation and the various challenges we're facing, which we'll touch upon in more detail, we're forced to look outside the box and truly change our overall approach to corporate housing, because it literally does embody so much more. And like you said, Bev, there really is no wrong answer.
Right. Do you know, I'd like to try to remove myself from the screen for a minute and focus on our two participants that are our subject matter experts, because, you know, MaryEllen, that insight of what you just shared is so dramatic and so much different today. So I'm going to go to Alex for something really quick. We heard on the household goods side sort of a state of the union. Can you provide us with something similar in this corporate housing area?
Well, sure. And thanks, Beverly. And hi, everyone. Good to see you again, even though I can't see you. Gosh, where to begin? You know, if you're a corporation, you've got people out and about utilizing any flavor of corporate housing, you're most likely experiencing some sticker shock. Rates are at an all-time high and they're widespread. So most every market is experiencing double-digit rate increases year over year. And in many of these markets, it's exceeding 20, 30, or even higher percent. At the same time, the availability is more scarce probably than it's ever been. which is making it more challenging, more difficult to get close to that office or that job site or that school district that you want to be in. You should be feeling a little bit of both of these, either a little bit or a lot of bit. And probably some of those are extreme situations. And really the root cause is the demand in this industry is far outpacing the supply. You can attribute the imbalance to a couple of driving factors or pressure points that are facing the industry. First and foremost is just that tidal wave in the home real estate market, which is pushing prospective homeowner or home buyers and sellers into the secondary housing space, right? So they're gobbling up hotels and apartments and Airbnbs and any place they can lay their head at night. And more importantly, they're not leaving there because it's so hard to find, so challenging to find that next home. They're staying there longer, and you can probably attest to this just thinking through your temp living benefits, right? So maybe your policy, calls for 30 days or 45 days of temp living, and you're coming to that realization that may not be sufficient in all cases.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So additionally, putting pressure on the industry is just the pandemic in general. And it's really changed kind of that corporate traditional thinking, right, of how things have historically been done. And some examples of that might be, we used to fly the employee back and forth every week. Well, now we're going to put them in an apartment for the duration of the project. Or we were going to relocate this individual, the family had concerns. So instead, we're going to put the employee in temporary housing for, until the dust settles.
Yeah.
And then just the multitudes of occurrences that companies have where they might be bunking people together, whether we're talking about crew personnel or interns. And because of the pandemic, they've split them apart. So you have the same number of employees, but you're using twice the number of hotels or twice the number of apartments.
Definitely.
So then just to kind of round out the demand, you sprinkle in the normal population growth, and then an above average dose of Mother Nature with fires and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes, et cetera. And you can see kind of how this demand is starting to pile up or take shape. At the same time, the supply line, kind of the lifeblood of demand.
Supply chain, right.
The supply line is lagging behind.
Okay.
So the construction industry as a whole is experiencing a significant shortage in labor. Not to mention the delays in the supply chain that Mike referenced in the household goods side of things, right, which is adding weeks and months, to the delivery of materials and lumber and fixtures required to build a new hotel or a new home or a new condo or a new apartment complex. So you got this huge demand on one end, and you've got a lagging supply line. And then lastly, I would just say that the labor shortage has not shied away from this industry. These properties are faced with the same challenges to attract and retain talent that most everybody on the line here can relate to.
And that's a great point, Alex, because it's hitting every industry.
So whether you're talking about the front desk clerk at a hotel or the maintenance guy at a apartment complex, those pay increases are reflected in some of these inflated rates that you're seeing.
Well, I just wanted to say this has all been very enlightening, but I'm taking both of your answers And as we've digested this, I'm going back to the actual trivia question that we asked the attendees. So I guess everybody can tell right here, there's really no wrong answer for anyone who actually responded. And Kathleen has monitored all of those in our chat box. You're all going to be receiving a Starbucks gift card from AFR Furniture Rental. Jen Bafford will be contacting each of you after the event is over and talk about how to arrange getting that gift card to you. So thanks for participating with those questions or those answers. Now, MaryEllen, going back to questions, you've definitely experienced ebbs and tides over the years, typically impacted by this economy. Do you have any additional thoughts to what Alex may have just said?
I do, Bev. Thank you. So overall, the lack of availability, and let me shed some light on that. There are many factors when there may be limited availability. One specific example I wanted to highlight is the amount of corporate apartments a property can set aside for corporate housing providers. Many apartment communities are only allowed a certain number of corporate leases on site. And once they hit that threshold, they can't accept any more corporate leases, which makes it challenging overall, but especially when working with larger groups. So oftentimes corporate housing providers are asked why the property may be showing availability on their website. And it's important for your provider to clearly communicate why that may not be the case if they have in fact reached that corporate max threshold. As a result, providers are not taking out the inventory because there's just little to be had. Another item I wanted to address is lead times. I recommend that clients provide their corporate housing partner with as much notice as possible when initiating a corporate housing request. Because of the inventory challenges that we're facing, your corporate housing provider needs ample time to research all available housing options to find the best fit for the client. So now more than ever, time is of the essence. And unfortunately, we just don't have the time to sit and mull things over, so to speak. Because of the ever-going lack of inventory and the delay in property response times, I urge clients to secure housing once a viable option is identified and presented. I also recommend that clients get all necessary contracts in place with their provider so that once an option is identified, the process to book the option isn't held up. It's always best to be proactive.
Wow, now that's a huge point right there, because it's not only giving a provider the lead time necessary as they put out the net for the search, so to speak, but it's also being very timely. It's not taking sometimes the 48 hours of past for the employee or the corporate person to be making the decision because they are being swooped up like that. So great points, MaryEllen. Now, I know you touched on this next generation earlier, that next gen of housing. I have two real quick short questions. What type of employee utilizes corporate housing today? And then I guess this isn't a question. Could you kind of walk us through what those options look like and that are available to the market as potentially the right fit to tackle today's environment?
Absolutely, sure thing. So this really addresses changes in traditional thinking that Alex referenced previously. In addition to standard corporate apartments, clients need to be open to explore other next gen or non-traditional types of accommodations, such as extended stay hotels, private rentals, which often include condominiums, townhomes, single family homes, university housing when appropriate, and web-based rentals, to name just a few. It really comes down to the best fit for the client's specific need and considering more diverse housing options when working with their corporate housing provider. It's critical to work with a provider who can offer more than just a corporate apartment in their porportfolio.
It's interesting you just are stating that, and I didn't mean to interrupt, because do all corporate housing partners really search all those models?
In my experience and in my tenure in the corporate housing sector, I can confidently say that there are very few corporate housing providers out there that have the bandwidth to explore and identify those next gen or non-traditional corporate housing options.
Very interesting. And I thank you for that, because
Sure.
you're just a wealth of knowledge.
No, and I didn't want to forget about the second portion of your question, Bev, and that is the type of employees who are utilizing corporate housing today. So,
Exactly.
in addition to the standard business traveler, I've seen an influx of intern programs who usually require quantities of housing in bulk numbers. I've also seen leadership rotations and employee relocations, military and government personnel,
Oh, yeah.
international assignees are just to name a few, but through the years, the traditional corporate traveler has evolved into so much more.
Yeah, great point. And do you know, I want to move back to Alex here now, and I haven't forgotten about you, Alex, by the way. Do you have any additional thoughts here?
I did think you forgot about me. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I do. Well, I do. I would maybe want to make it a little more granular, or take it a little more granular. You know, you can have 2 employees, same pay grade, same job title. You know, one's going to a big city, one's going to small town USA, and one's going to a resort type area. The other one's going to an industrial type area. One's a renter, one's a homeowner. You know, one's a single individual, and one's got a spouse and 3 kids and 2 dogs and a cat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so really it's, you know, outside of today's environment, which is one, you know, that's one part of the discussion. But really having some of these additional tools in your arsenal is a good thing, right? It can help you combat not only today's environment, but some of these other situations as well.
Mm-hmm. With that, those points are really points that we've talked about, but I'm reading right now something that's coming in. So this attendee is stating, those are great points that you just brought up. You just walked us through all of this. Where does cost factor in? As I have tried to explain to my C-level and justifying nightly rates going as high as $240 a night versus $180 a night in the same market. So can you do that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, number one, that 180 to 240 is what things look like today, and that was part of the opening remarks. And it's an unfortunate world we live in. But yeah, the cost factor in similar to those other points. And you know, another thing that I didn't mention was the length of stay. You know, somebody might be there 15 days or need a housing option for 15 days. The other one might be there for 6 months, right? So all of those things factor in. And again, you know, really what comes to my mind is some of those processes have been developed years ago on how you tackle housing. And in some instances, it becomes almost a cookie cutter approach. So we do it this way and we're always going to do it this way. Well, you know, some of these things that we're talking about in today's environment or beyond today's environment are, you know, looking outside of what you've typically looked at can not only be beneficial for that employee experience, but it can help protect your bottom line.
Good. And that's a great point. So while you've both been answering this question, I do have another Vinny. Hi, Vinny. This says, hi, MaryEllen and Alex. In regards to alternative options, do you see other corporations, clients using Airbnb, VRBO, etc.? And he goes on to ask, what about the duty of care and letting your employees selecting their own property? He says, I have chatted with many corporate clients in the past, and we are worried about using these alternative options without the appropriate vetting of properties and also being liable if something goes wrong. Thanks. MaryEllen, I'm coming to you first on this one.
Sure, definitely. So in my experience, when I've talked to clients in regards to Airbnb, they are hesitant because they are non-regulated. And so there's a cause of concern in regards to whether or not someone can gain access to the unit at any given time, or how will they get the keys, or if there's a maintenance emergency, sort of who do they contact?
Mhm.
So the conversations that I've had with my clients is more of a direct approach, like, rather than rule out any option altogether, I'm going to let you make the decision on whether or not you want us to go down that avenue or that path, because you, at the end of the day, are the ones that are responsible for, your clients or your guests and putting in these types of environments. And so it's really not a one size fits all. Some companies do go down that route, and some don't.
But so when they're doing that, to couple to Vinny's question before I ask Alex to interject, two things. Are you letting them do them on their own, or are there the companies that will vet, as he asks, properly vet the property and then manage the property and keeping it so the duty of care is complied with?
So in regards to whether a corporate housing provider would, I can speak to the companies that have explored these options. They do the vetting process from beginning to end, just to give the client peace of mind at the end of the day, and to avoid any hiccups down the line.
Okay.
So in that respect, yes. And so I don't know if I have answered that to Vinny's satisfaction, but I'll turn it over to Alex if he wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple of additional comments, and it really is that vetting process, right? And having that checklist. When was the last time you replaced the this and the that? How old are the appliances? What's your process for cleaning the unit? And then typically working, looking for those properties that have a property management company behind them, as opposed to, Bob and Susan on this place. The other piece that I'd reference is just the duty of care, right? Knowing where your people are, and which comes into that lump sum conversation as well. And that's a constant for companies, right? Knowing where their people are and are they taken care of in the normal course of business. So I don't know that the other one thing I would add to this Airbnb and Bourbon conversation is, I don't know that I would hang my hat on it and make it an option one. But when you think about your employees, I can assure you that most of them, if you polled them and said, how many of you use this type of product, a lot of hands would go up. So it's not a stranger to your employee base. It probably leads to some uncomfortability, right, as a company.
Right.
But I think if you're fully going through that vetting process, it is a possible avenue for sure.
And Vinny has chatted something while you're both also giving some great insight to the point of view of the supplier side. He says, I followed this approach, asked the employee to sign a release form, becoming fully liable and released from any involvement from the company or their RMCs. So Vinny, valuable input, and I'm sure that all of our attendees are also making note of that. So I know we're going a little bit long, but I cannot eliminate these next couple of questions as well. Today's talent, harder and harder to really acquire and to maintain. If you're going to retain the talent you find, how does corporate housing really come into play? And let's try to be, as condensed as possible, but still valuable information, Alex.
Yeah. Well, what did you mean by that, Beverly?
Well,
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, today's talent, and it's not only it's becoming more challenging, but it's that specific talent, right? That you're chasing, and really or that you want to retain. Um, and really, the thought here is that you can turn corporate housing into, a tool to help in your recruiting process and your retention program. Um, and I'm not saying to disrupt everything and use this kind of thoughts for everybody that's using corporate housing from your company, but you know who your key people are, who you want to attract or who you want to retain. And there's some things you can do for nominal dollars, right? Adding a cable package or putting a case of bottled water in the refrigerator. And there's hundreds of examples of that, a gift basket or filling up the cupboards with some consumer staples. So also when I'm thinking about today's talent, the remote workforce comes to mind, right? So I know there's companies out there that we've worked with, and I've heard from other companies that are doing this as well, to where, you really need to look into the Wi-Fi and the router and even consider adding an additional room, right? So that you've got a temporary office space, right?
Mhm.
You can put a desk and an office chair in there, especially if you got two children and you need to close the door at some point. So
Sure.
that would be my thoughts on those.
Okay. And I know we only have 4 minutes left, so those who can remain on, there are a couple more key factors we want to bring out, but we're also going to play some trivia if some can stay even longer. So MaryEllen, I'm coming to you. What do you recommend to clients who are in need of temporary housing?
Thanks, Bev. So again, just to drive home some key points that I brought up earlier, try to provide as much lead time as possible when a housing need is initiated, and try to be patient with your housing provider, because they're behind the scenes looking for the perfect option for your need. And they're looking to research and identify the best fit for your need. When looking for stays less than 30 days, I recommend companies be flexible and possibly consider extended stay hotel options. And for stays 30 days or longer, explore any and all of the options, whether traditional or non-traditional, because it's not a one size fits all anymore when it comes to corporate housing. Today's corporate housing encompasses so much more. Thanks, Bev.
Thank you. And Alex, any additional thoughts from you, even including red flags?
Well, I know that people are paying, they're seeing the price at the pump, right? Right. So the rates are going up and the availability is more scarce. I really want to reference what Vinny asked to the household goods side, right? I think it was Vinny. How long is this going to last? How long can we expect this? And quite honestly, there is no magic wand that's going to shore this up in 3 months, right? So even when things get back to normal from on the home real estate front or on the pandemic front, this is going to linger for years. And yes, I was with an S, Beverly.
Yeah.
I think if you get a chance over the weekend or during the next week or two, read up on this labor shortage and this demand and supply, which is impacting both the real estate side and this corporate housing world. It's eye-opening, to say the least. The other thing I would say just about that is it's super easy to raise your price. If you think about the real world for a little bit, it's exponentially more difficult to lower your price. So kind of keep that thought in your mind as well. The other one thing that I would throw in there, and I touched base on it with Benny's question, was the lump sum. We've got trained professionals that are doing this year in and year out. If you're handling this temporary living or corporate housing with dollars, and again, I'm not talking about disrupting your program, and I'm also not referring to the new hire that's can fit their belongings in their station wagon. It's really you know, that undue frustration that these employees that are having to do it on their own, tackle this by themselves with these rates staring them in the face and this limited availability is very, very challenging and can cause some undue frustration.
Yeah,